Welcome to Jewish Wisdom on JTV, the global Jewish channel. We really hope you're enjoying our programming, and to make sure you get updated when we release new videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button, which is literally just below this video if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're watching this on Facebook, be sure to like our page. So today I want to speak to you about the Jewish holiday of Passover, Pesach, which is coming up. If you know anything about the story of Passover, you'll know that it marks the exodus of the Jewish people from Egypt. The Jews were slaves to Pharaoh. God produces a bunch of plagues and miracles, and the Jews are freed, and now we celebrate. It's very clear that the big theme of Passover is celebrating our freedom. We were slaves, and now we're free. In fact, Passover is even known as Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom. So with that in mind, I want to show you something which has been bothering me, to be honest, for a while. It's a remarkable and deeply moving picture. This is a picture of the Jews in the Lodz ghetto in Nazi Poland, where they were baking matzah in hiding. It's really quite amazing. Such dedication to the Jewish faith in a time of such challenge. And this picture is just one of countless stories of Jews secretly observing their Judaism during the Holocaust. In fact, it is told that there were even Jews who even attempted to have their own Passover Seder meal in Auschwitz. Only it was without all the food. It was just the telling of the story of the Exodus. But the more I looked at this picture, and the more I thought about all these stories, the more I began to question whether this is actually even appropriate. If Passover is meant to be celebrating the fact that we were once oppressed, but now we are free, then how can you celebrate Passover in Auschwitz? How can you celebrate your freedom when you are bound in chains? Well, it all comes down to one simple question. What does it mean to be free? What is the definition of freedom? If being free means not being oppressed by another person or a political force, if it means not facing any external constraints, then yes. It certainly seems bizarre to be celebrating your freedom when you're locked up in a concentration camp. But who says that's what real freedom is? Let me ask you something. Is an alcoholic free? He certainly isn't being oppressed by anyone or any political force. He's not in prison or a labor camp, but he is enslaved to his own body's desires. Is a man who leads his life totally obsessed with impressing his peers a free person? He also hasn't been locked up, but his lifestyle has been totally overtaken by pleasing his environment, that he's no longer free to think for himself. You see, there's two levels to freedom. There's external freedom and internal freedom. External freedom, whether or not we are being persecuted or oppressed, is something that is out of our control, as Jewish history tells us all too clearly. But this is, in Jewish thought, a very superficial form of freedom. Internal freedom, on the other hand, is the ability to have control over your inner self, to have control over your bodily drives and desires, and it means to have the ability to think and assess things for yourself, not just to be a product of your environment. Internal freedom is real freedom. Someone who stuffs his face full of food endlessly might think he's being free to do as he wishes, but he's actually enslaved to his bodily desires. I actually remember a few years ago, there was this big internet craze called Neck Nominate, where people would drink in one go dangerous amounts of alcohol and upload the video online. And someone actually died as a result of the damage to his liver. To many, these videos showed the height of teenage free living. But if you're prepared to put your life at risk in order to impress your friends online, then you're enslaved to your peers. Real freedom is when you can be in control of your body, and real freedom is when you can be in control of your mind, when you can think for yourself and not let your environment do the thinking for you. The reason why we became free when we left Egypt was not because we were now free from Egyptian oppression. We knew that in the future we would face more challenges and persecution. But what we were celebrating was the fact that we were starting to learn the meaning of internal freedom. We were given the opportunity to escape from the Egyptian culture and mindset which had so deeply invaded our behavior. In Egypt, we were no longer able to think and act with our own intuition. We were literally zombies of Egyptian culture. But when we left Egypt, we were being taught the power of internal freedom, of being able to be in control of body and mind. It's interesting that throughout Jewish literature, we refer to the exodus from Egypt as Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. What's weird about this is that it should really be, in Hebrew, Yetziat Mitzrayim, the leaving from Egypt. But instead we just call it Yetziat Mitzrayim, which literally means that Egypt, the geographical land, got up and left. What does that mean? An explanation is offered that far more than the Exodus being about the Jewish people leaving Egypt, it was about Egypt leaving the Jewish people, the Jewish mindset. That's why, ironically, the very first Passover Seder was commemorated in Egypt. The first Seder took place the night before we were given the go-ahead from Pharaoh to leave. We celebrated freedom when we were still technically slaves to Pharaoh. But the reason why we could do it is because real freedom isn't about what's happening to you. It's about what's happening within you. It's not about your circumstances, it's about how you choose to respond to your circumstances. On the first Seder night, we began to realize as a people that our true freedom lay in having control of our actions and not being enslaved to our body or the environment we find ourselves in. Natan Sharansky, the famous Jewish Soviet prisoner, wrote inside his prison cell that the moment I decided never to make a moral compromise, I was free. Now, that being said, what is up with this thing here, matzah? Why is this food so important on Pesach? We say that this is the bread that supposedly represents our freedom. And everyone says that it's because we were in such a hurry when we left that we didn't have time to let the bread rise. But that can't really be the full picture, because we ate matzah on the night before we left Egypt, when we were still technically enslaved. Matzah represents freedom because of something more fundamental. Why is it that we are so obsessed with not eating bread on Passover? Why do we have to eat matzah to celebrate our freedom? The basic difference between matzah and bread is two things: time and space. More time in the oven, and the dough starts to rise in space. But you see, that's just the thing about freedom. If you want to understand the meaning of real freedom, it's being free from time and space. It's being free from the time in which you live, the society or environment you are a part of, and being able to think for yourself and challenge your surroundings. It's being free from the space you occupy, your bodily drives, and being able to be in control of your urges. Matzah is the bread of freedom because it represents true freedom, being in control of your actions. Throughout the entire Passover Seder, we are encouraged to ask questions, because that's where true freedom begins, when you can start to think and act for yourself, not let someone or something else be in the driving seat of your life. And that has been the secret to the Jewish impact on the world. Today, the majority of the world believe in the God of Abraham, a remarkable thing. 2,000, 3,000 years ago, the majority of the world were pagans or polytheists. Today, the majority of the world believe in things like the sanctity of life, peace as an ideal, and social responsibility. But while the Jewish Bible spoke of these principles for millennia, throughout most of our history, we lived in societies which were at odds with these values. Our ability to stay true to who we are, but also to have influenced so much of the world's value systems, lies in the secret of what it means to be free. Real freedom is the ability to remain loyal to what is right and true when your environment and your negative urges within you want you to do otherwise. And therefore, not only was it possible to mark the holiday of freedom in Auschwitz, it was actually highly appropriate. By showing that they were not going to cave into the emotions and pain and suffering that was being inflicted upon them, they were declaring their own inner freedom. And perhaps it was their Nazi oppressors who were the real slaves, because they were so brainwashed by their Nazi culture and their animalistic way of life that they were no longer acting autonomously. You can celebrate freedom when you're locked up in prison, because in Judaism, freedom isn't about the circumstances you find yourself in, it's about how you choose to respond to them. From all of us at JTV, we wish you and your family a happy Pesach, Chag Sameach, and don't forget to subscribe.